any listener who's dealing with a sexual challenge or a relationship challenge, but especially a sexual challenge, really challenge yourself to write the story of that sexual challenge and use, Alexandra is feeling this and Todd is feeling this, literally writing the story in the third person. And so I think that just invites you into that relational perspective if you're having a hard time getting there on your own. And once you've got that more we perspective, different avenues for coping open up.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I am so excited to share this fire conversation I just had with one of my friends, Dr. Alexandra Solomon, all about love, all about how do we keep it good, right? All about why love needs to be a daily practice. You might know her work. She is on Instagram, has a very popular Instagram account, which I love. I'm trying to think of it. I think I met her through friends. But anyway, she is a PhD, internationally recognized as one of the most trusted voices in the world of relationships. And her framework of relational self-awareness has reached millions of people around the globe. She's a couples therapist, a speaker, an author, a professor at I think it's Northwestern University, right? And she's been a clinician and in the trenches for many years. So we have a lot in common. She's got an amazing podcast. She has 2 other books. So this is actually her 3rd book. Her first book was called Taking Sexy Back. And the second book was called Loving Bravely. And this book is called Love Every Day, 365 Relational Self-Awareness Practices to help your relationship heal, grow, and thrive. And I really think that you will I love this book. I think it's like a 1-a-day thing that you can do with your partner or just do on your own to really raise your own relational self-awareness, which is amazing. But also I hope that you love this conversation with Alex because we had a blast doing it. Wow, I'm super excited to welcome back to the Terri Cole Show, my friend, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Come on back. Hi, Allie.
How lucky am I to get to be with you again? I love this.
You're a repeat guest. I love it. So many things to talk about. And actually, you and I could talk about things forever and ever because we have so many things to talk about. But actually, what I want to talk about is your brand new book, baby, coming out in 5 days, which is called Love Every Day, 365 Relational Self-Awareness Practices to help your relationship heal, grow, and thrive. So I would love to know, because I kind of already know, but I want you to talk to the audience and the people on YouTube. What is the origin of this book? How did this book come about?
Okay, well, so first of all, I love this book. I mean, I know that whenever we write a book, right, it's like just launching something that is so special and so precious out into the world. And I know that you're as nerdy and excitable about books as I am. But this is a really beautiful book. Like, I'm proud of how beautiful, like how aesthetically pleasing it is. It has like this wonderful, like hardcover, really beautiful navy silk bookmark because it's a book that you take with you for a year. It just is yours to guide and support you for a year. And I think my whole life I have loved those 365
Me too.
books, like just a little micro dose of something. Those have always just really spoken to me. So the fact that now I'm offering one that's really exciting. And so the origin, is that it's, I've been doing these sort of mini essays and mini lessons on social media for many, many years. And there's a pragmatic part, which is I've had so many people say, remember that one you did a few weeks ago? And it was about the in-laws and things that we post on social media are so ephemeral. They're there and they're gone. And so this is a really lovely way to have a collection that is in your hands and usable. But it didn't, it's sort of, they're new, they're zhuzh, and they're sort of presented in this way that you just get to have a little dose every day because that's how healing is, isn't it? It's not a big, grand insight puzzle piece that makes everything fall into place. It is just the step-by-step.
So let's talk about love because basically that's what this book is about. How do we keep, curate, maintain, enhance the love in our lives? So let's start with why love needs to be a daily practice, according to you.
Because it's so easy for us to get off track. I mean, I'm 25 years into my marriage. I know
Same.
you and Vic have been at it for a long time. It's really easy to get off track. It's easy to put other things to the front burner, and sometimes other things exactly need to be on the front burner. But it's really nice to have avenues back. And I know for me, one of the things that I have found is that the longer we go without having a heartfelt conversation or a deeper physical connection, the longer we go, the easier it is to just kind of stay in that drifted away space. And so it's nice to have lots of avenues back to, finding your way to an easier, simpler connection. And so it's like a daily, like almost like a chiropractor, and you just need those little adjustments and tweaks.
So for you guys, for you and Todd, how do you, what would you say is any of your daily habits to keep it good are?
One of them is walking. I think that is so essential for us. I think we have our best conversations when our bodies are moving. And I think there's something
Mm,
about, first of all, it's not face to face. So there's something a little bit less threatening, and something about that position of being side by side. There's something that kind of brings the defenses down. I think that when we are working on kind of a knotty, gnarly kind of dynamic that we're struggling with, it's really nice to be moving, first of all, because movement is the opposite of
hmm.
stuckness. And then
Right.
also you're traveling, so you're seeing new things. I think something about seeing something new that almost like cues the brain and the heart and the soul to kind of experience something new. So I think that's one of our practices, is just movement together. How about for you?
I actually love that so much. I was going to say, I mean, Vic and I start our day with meditating together every day. So that is
Mm-hmm.
something that, and I find that if we're traveling, if somehow we get off track, because of course that happens too, that both of us we are so much less patient with each other and with ourselves. But I really, of course, I notice it most in him. I imagine he notices it in me as well. But when we start our day in stillness and silence together, it's almost like for me, it feels like it strengthens the unified field, or our unified field, right? We have a shared field energetically.
Yeah.
And when we start it in that way, there's something not rushed, there's something together, but it definitely sets us up for a better day, whatever that day is going to be, whatever we're doing. So that's one of the things that I think is really helpful.
Well, and you know darn well that a somatic therapist, a body-based therapist, would say that by co-regulating your nervous systems, right, by
Hmm.
making sure that you both are in that, what they call like the ventral state, where
Right.
you are kind of open, to have that be side by side and open together, is so wonderful. I love that also, when I'm working with couples that are in, about half of my caseload at any moment are couples who are recovering from infidelity. And I am
Mm.
always looking for ways to, certainly as you're recovering from infidelity, the difficult conversations are vital, right? The accountability, the acknowledgement, the empathy that's expressed through words, that's important. But there's
Yeah.
something so key about our bodies being near each other and our bodies being relaxed. It's like that's such a trust builder. It's such a
Yeah.
collaboration builder. So I can see meditation as being a really powerful practice for couples who are also, struggling and needing to have those experiences of like, I am safe near you.
Yes. One thing I wanted to say before we move on to the next question is what you were talking about walking with Todd, and how
Yeah.
that is something that it's easier to sort of problem solve. And actually, there is statistical evidence about breakthrough thinking. I was just read a book called
Right.
The Net and the Butterfly, which was so
Mm.
friggin' good, but about breakthrough thinking and about how walking, moving your body at the same time, especially if you're trying to figure something out, how there's all these statistics around how much better problem solvers we are when we're in movement.
Oh, it just makes so much sense. Todd and I are in a season of massive transition,
Right.
individual transitions, these milestone birthdays we're both doing, and then family system transition of becoming empty nesters. And we were, like that. You're not fighting, but there's just, the tone is clipped. There's not a lot of eye contact. Like we just had these kind of like, just tension building. And we headed out for a walk, and, it started off with just picking at each other. And then it was like a breakthrough. It was just like the more we walked, moving, keeping our bodies moving, and it helped me stay regulated. I couldn't flee. I had thoughts of turning around and heading my ass home, but I didn't. I hung in there. And by the end of the walk, I was like, oh, you're my pal. Like, you're not out to get me. I'm not out to get you. It was just so,
Yes,
and it would not have been that conversation if we were sitting, at home. So,
absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about why relational self-awareness is the key to healthy relationships. So let's, if you would just talk about, because maybe someone doesn't know what relational self-awareness is. So would you tell us and then talk about why it's important?
yeah. Relational self-awareness is it's the through line of all of the work that I do. And it's a process. I'm fully aware that I stand on the shoulders of giants. So I've been studying the research of relationship science, and I've been a couples therapist for many decades. And so this is sort of a pulling together of a process whereby I, as an individual, am understanding my patterns, my tender spots. A lot of it is looking to the past, early roles I played in my family of origin, and how the past travels with us. That we come into relationship with all of these, and they all feel like capital T truths. You are objectively being hurtful right now. And relational self-awareness helps us not kind of get stuck in that you are being objectively hurtful. It helps us be curious. Okay, I am feeling hurt. I am feeling stung. And what's the me piece? What's the you piece? What's the us piece? So it's a process of steady, gentle AF self-inquiry, because it's not ever about beating ourselves up. It's also not ever about really throwing our parents under the bus, because by and large, our parents do the best they can do when they're doing it, but it is recognizing that the intimate partnership is basically an opportunity to look at, rework, ideally heal the stuff that we come in with.
Right. So really what it is and what you're saying is it's us taking responsibility for what we're bringing, the experiences that we're bringing, so that we can be aware, am I having a transference? And I love that you made the distinction. Perhaps you are being hurtful objectively, right? Perhaps
Sure.
what you're saying is not nice right now. But my response and my reaction, if it's an amplified one, is my responsibility to understand and go, oh, right now, this reminds me of this thing. So let me try to step back. And I think that it really requires us to do our work, though, right?
It does. It does. And we're not ever done. I think that we can do better than ever before. And when we're at one of those, nodes, like a transitional node, or, one or both partners' stress levels are higher, or life is kind of throwing you a curveball, we can't always make those connections kind of seamlessly and in real time about, wait, I'm being reactive. What's going on? We sometimes really do still need that pause, that step away. And that's why one of the key skills is learning how to say you're sorry and apologize and repair, because we're not ever going to get it right all the time.
Yeah, I think that what I love about this book is that the accessibility of what you write about and the way that you write. So this is your third book, but Alex, the way that you have this ability to take complicated, therapeutic stuff and make it accessible to like just regular people who are like, I just really want to make my relationship better, or I just want to be seen, or I just want to feel heard. I think that that is a unique skill that you bring to this book. And the fact that this is an every day of the year type of a thing, it really does make it available, because I have to say, a lot of times it feels overwhelming to my clients.
Yeah.
They feel like there's so much to do, but exactly the same way why you like a every day of the year situation, that other people do too. So I love the format of the book, and I agree with you. It's beautiful and it's rich. So let's move into some other topics that you cover in the book. How do you approach, or how can we, people who are in couples, sexual challenges or relationship challenges, how do we do it as a team and sort of not get blamey and polarized in it,
Yeah. 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 Well, especially when it comes to sex, because for so many reasons, in part, none of us are, I think some young people are, I'm really impressed with the college students I have today who are coming into their sexuality, having been raised in homes where there really was gentle, open conversation about sex. But for the rest of us, we did not grow up
For anyone
like
over the age of 40.
That's right. Right. Over 40. And because the stake, I think so often a sexual problem, I think because sex is embodied, it's in our body, it happens in and through our bodies, we can point to, it is my absence of orgasm. It is your, erectile challenge. It is my high libido. It's your lower libido. We can sort of, it's especially around sex because it's so kind of concrete and behavioral. It can be especially easy to get blamey, and the stakes feel very high. We have a ton of mythology about how it should be. So especially sexual challenges, we are at risk of getting deeply afraid that something's wrong with us, that we are bad, broken, or being very blamey and judgy of our partner. And so it's an invitation to couples every single time to really, when you're looking at your sexual challenge, figure out what's the we story. And I have a practice that a colleague of mine at Northwestern, Eli Finkel, did some research years ago that I just love so much and I share all the time. And I think he didn't really even know. He's a scientist, not a clinician. So he didn't even know, I don't think, how powerful this was. But he basically had couples, there was a control group and then another group. And there were the one set of couples was assigned the task of every so often taking 10 or 15 minutes and writing about their most recent fight or difficult conversation from the lens of a neutral third party who cares very much about both of them, like literally writing the story in the third person. And so I think that any listener who's dealing with a sexual challenge or a relationship challenge, but especially a sexual challenge, really challenge yourself to write the story of that sexual challenge and use, Alexandra is feeling this and Todd is feeling this. It just invites you into that relational perspective if you're having a hard time getting there on your own. And once you've got that more we perspective, different avenues for coping open up. Probably not solving. I didn't use the word solving because a lot of what we deal with, as a lot of couple challenges are not solvable. They're just to be held with ever more gentleness and humor, oftentimes humor, really.
Yes. I love that idea though, because when you're getting this macro view by by looking at it from a third party of someone who's very caring of both, now it's like that tunnel vision. If you actually do that exercise the way that it is instructed, it's almost like your tunnel vision of right and wrongness disappears because you can now look and go, oh, there might have been something else that happened, or there might have been something that happened for my partner. And it doesn't feel like you're losing something when you're doing it that way, where sometimes it feels threatening in the moment to have to admit maybe we're doing something wrong or that we have not been clear about how we feel or what we want,
Yeah, that's right. And I think that, and I think it's speculative, right? So in this exercise, you're writing about what you imagine is happening for your partner. And so you may not get it right, but especially if you can challenge yourself to be benign, to assume something benign. Like you tell me what you think, but after sitting with 20 plus years of couples, most of whom are straight couples, I think a common theme among the husbands I have known, the boyfriends I've known over the years, is they're deeply afraid of disappointing their partner. And now they do not always cope with that feeling particularly well, shutting down, getting defensive, pointing a finger. But the core of, I am afraid of not measuring up in your eyes. I want you happy. Your happiness matters to me, maybe even a little bit too much. But so that, kind of playing with that even, that what if your partner is afraid of disappointing you? And that's what's going on for them. So that sort of assuming that benign intent. But
yes. And it's also a sort of creates immediate empathy. Like just that, what you just said, immediately I felt compassion, being like, well, that would be different, right? Because it's so easy to assume sort of malignant or not benign intent, right? Where it's like, you knew that would hurt my feelings or whatever it is, which is not necessarily true. I love that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how cultural contexts and identity shape our relationships, our actual romantic relationships.
Yeah. Well, it's such a big one. And that, I think we just kind of opened the gender lens a little bit, like there towards the end. I think that we're all socialized, and we're socialized at the intersection of our gender and our race and our socioeconomic status and our religious background, our sexuality. All of those kind of big variables that describe us shape what we want, expect, and fear in our intimate relationships. And so when couples look really similar. I think it's easy to miss. And the one that gets missed, frankly, most often is socioeconomic status. And oftentimes partners come together, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, when they might look rather similar financially. But a lot of times the conflict, underneath a conflict that is about money or spending or where we live or what we drive, oftentimes that conflict, what partners are missing. When I've got one of those couples in my office, I always want to know how they grew up. What was your neighborhood like when you were growing up? What was your understanding, kind of how your family system talked about money? So I think that's one where we're socialized around a relationship with, money, socioeconomics, and we can sort of miss the ways in which that shapes a conflict. So I want couples to always be curious about, you might be experiencing this differently from me, not because of a personality difference, not because you're out to get me, but because we really actually grew up looking at the world quite differently. And then that becomes another compassion opener, curiosity opener.
Yeah, I think that what we're talking about too requires conversations, like actual conversations where, back in the day when I was also working with couples, they would come into the office and I just felt like they'd get so polarized that there was no actual conversation. It always seemed like, they got to the point, some of them of coming into my office, it's like, everything was accusatory. Everything was a problem. Everything was a trigger. I feel like some couples wait so long that by the time they get there, they can't even talk to each other without. And do you think that some of that has to do with this not communicating or not understanding each other's backstory?
Yeah. Boy, I wish that couples, my stance about couples therapy is early and often. And I know that couples therapy is not available to everybody. It's not financially possible for everybody. But if you have the ability to do couples therapy, right, go before you get to that point, because it is, it's so incredibly painful when I have a couple come in and they've been having that same fight and they can just basically write it. They know when I say this, you're going to say that. And they've had the same conversation over and over again. It's much harder to undo that. Not impossible, but it's harder to undo that than, I love it when an engaged couple comes in, or a couple that's getting ready to move in together. There's not, early and often is really just such a wonderful approach, because you cannot have the same conversation in a couples therapist office that you can have at home. So just by bringing in a third party, you've broken it up. It's what I love about this book so much, is that, if one partner is resistant to couples therapy, or it's not just feasible to do it right now, those entries can act as a different way of standing vis-a-vis this topic. It opens up the possibility of a different conversation. Because you're right, there is like this sort of, once the cycle starts that way, there's so much inertia. Like there's just like this inertia where the engine has started. And so we're just going to go through, and it's really hard to pull yourselves out. Once you're in that conversation you've had 1,000 times, it's really hard to pull out of it.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's really not, if we were being really straight about what it is, it's really not a conversation, right? It's just a polarized script where you say this and I say that, and we never get to anything. What I was going to say, it's funny you said it first, but is that this book is sort of a perfect and completely affordable. Like if you're someone who's in a relationship and you're like, I think we're good, but I think we could use a tune-up, or we're not good and I think we could use help. This is something that you can invite your partner to do with you. And it's not overwhelming, because you're literally saying, hey, let's just read one a day. And then talk about it. Vic and I have done this for years with Stoicism books, where we'll just read a passage and just talk about it. And it's short, right? These are like daily things that you can do. But again, normalizing the act of talking. And I think that because the book is so beautifully written and it's not threatening, right? It's not what you're writing about is a gentle invitation as opposed to something else. It might be a way of really getting a conversation going for those who maybe are having trouble with conversations. Like there's a lot we can do outside of the therapy room too. And this is what is so beautiful about so many of us professional therapists being out here. Your Instagram, people should be following you, should be listening to your podcast. And of course, we'll have all the information in the show notes, but it's something that there is so much good information out there. You're putting out so much good free information. And in some ways, I feel like we're like warriors trying to even the playing field a little bit,
That's right.
you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really, I mean, I grew up in a house where my mom had a stack of self-help books, next to her bed at all times. So the self-help genre, it's not brand new. But what's different today, and I know, I mean, you create such beautiful content. I have so much admiration for everything that you do. It's like right, everything you're sending to me, I'm sending right back to you. It's such an exciting time to have access. Like there's just so much available, as you're saying, and it doesn't have to be big and grand. And it certainly doesn't have to be multiple hours a day. I have had couples in my office where there's so much emotional processing that they are just grinding themselves down to the nubbin. And I'm like, put a timer on 25 minutes a day. And then you've got to go do something else, talk about something light, experience something together, be playful, feed your geese if you're, Terry and Vic.
If you're me.
Just, do something else, because too much, it's, I think sometimes for those, I think when somebody discovers this realm and starts to take on this language and starts to see things, these multiple levels happening, connecting the past to the present, it's really exciting. And I think that sometimes we can dive in so much that we forget that we get to also give ourselves rest and peace and space. I don't know if you feel like you find that with the people that you're interfacing with, where sometimes you're like, put the book down, put the podcast down,
Absolutely.
go listen to some comedy or something.
Yes, I feel that in my courses too, my mastermind, all of it, where I absolutely say there has to be a moment where rest and play has to be a part of our lives too, intentionally. We can't be so like, I must fix now because, hey, I always say, oh, it also took a really long time for you to get here. It's going to take a minute. So this is a bit of a long game that we're playing. In the book, one of the entries is talking about the importance of family of origin. So let's talk a little bit, if you would share your thoughts on how it's important for us to understand the way that we show up and that the family of origin stuff, how it shows up in our present day lives.
Right. Yeah. I think that family of origin stuff shows up really powerfully and oftentimes quite subtly. There's a lot of talk these days about trauma and about attachment styles. And so, yes, those are really, really helpful frames. And there's a lot of sort of sub threshold, right? It's things that don't count as trauma, but count as roles, the roles we played, the parts of ourselves that our family really, really reinforced, and the parts of ourselves that our family was like, oh, no, maybe a little bit less of that, So noticing those sort of more subtle ways that we now in an intimate partnership might be at risk of turning the volume down on our energy or enthusiasm because we were told when we were growing up that we were a bit, too much for everybody. And so maybe in an intimate partnership now, I get to be a little more playful, be a little more vocal. And, but there's just the ways in which we may need to reclaim lost parts of ourselves, ways in which we are at risk of turning our partner into that critical parent, even when they aren't being. I think that there are, times that we can code. It's times in therapy where I will watch a couple process and something won't strike me as particularly critical, but I'm watching one partner experience their spouse, in the way they used to experience their critical parent. So looking at who did you have to be? Who are you not allowed to be? A lot of the entries in the book are that. We start with an idea and then we run it through the lens of, okay, so how did that play out in your family growing up?
The information, like knowing that about yourself, is so incredibly powerful in making changes. I remember I had a therapist many years ago when Vic and I were first together, and he was, he was more cynical and more sort of had darker moods. I mean, makes sense with his life history. I was always very sunny and optimistic and extroverted, and the moment he would have a dark mood might come in, and I'm not even talking about like a day, right? It's like a day, and my tolerance was so low. I'd be like panicking because there was a period of time in my life when my mother got depressed, and it was like, I just kept thinking. And I remember my therapist, Bev, was like, okay, so this is your job. If you can, and you're alone and you're starting to think that, say out loud, Vic is not mom.
Oh, beautiful. That's beautiful.
Right? Super helpful.
Yeah.
Where you go, oh, look, I'm having a transference. And it's not based in my reality now. And how because I remember just trying to be so controlling about that mood. And so like,
Yes.
you don't have any reason to be sad or whatever I was trying to beat him into submission 24 years ago, 25 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
That really helped me go. And she was like, Tara, your little kid is afraid that he's going to
Sure.
slip into a depression. You
That's
had
right.
that experience. That's what she's afraid of. But he's not her.
Mm-mm.
Relax. And of course,
Mm-mm.
it never happened and it was fine. But that information had me not acting it out, which is exactly what we're talking about.
That's
When
right.
you have more information and self-reflection and understanding, we stop blaming so much and being like, no, it's definitely you. Where
Right.
you go, okay, it could be part me too.
Right, right. That's right. Your sensitivity. You brought in a sensitivity, and the little girl part of you, yeah, didn't know that was then and this is now. That Vic can have a
Exactly.
mood without it becoming an because for a little kid to have a parent that is unavailable, unreachable like that is incredibly scary. And
Yep.
that is right. And it's not Vic's job to paint a smile on his face in order to keep your little girl from getting activated, right? That's not what this is ever about. It's not about sort of
Right.
like laying our wounds at our partner's feet and saying,
Right.
because I had a mom who battled addiction, a dad who, had mental health challenges, you can't ever X, Y, or Z. It's not ever that, but it is about
Right.
that context and I'm sensitive to this. And I know that, I'm at risk of personalizing for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It
Indeed.
is
All right.
really helpful.
I have one more question for you. So, because I get a lot of questions about dating and that how challenging for many of the people who write into me, the dating world is right now for them. So, what are your thoughts and what have you seen in your practice on
Mhm.
why dating is so challenging in today's world?
Yeah. I am sure that if we were talking to people, 50, 60, 70 years ago, they would have been like, dating was hard back then, back then as well. So I don't know that dating has ever been easy because the vulnerability is wholly inevitable. The risk is wholly inevitable. So
Mhm.
there's something about that, like needing to put oneself out there and being patient and wanting to have answers quickly so that you know whether to invest more or cut and run. But there's something for sure about what it is to date today, I think in part it has to do with everything we're talking about, that there's a way in which, because there's so much more consciousness about relationships, I love the memes that go around about like, on your Tinder profile, I want to see a letter, from your therapist. I want to know how many sessions you've done. I want to understand, your core wounds before we even meet for a cup of coffee. So I think there was a neat, Bumble does a survey every year of dating trends. And for the first time ever last year, attractiveness, when they were surveying people who are dating and asking them, like, what are you looking for in a partner? For the first time ever, attractiveness was not even in the top 5. It was all about trustworthiness and emotional availability and humor. Of course, humor is always up there. But I thought that is really, in that way, it's an exciting time, but it's
Right.
difficult also because you may not know right away whether somebody is emotionally available. It may take a moment, and you may have these transferences, as you're calling them, to, well, they didn't text me back within X number of minutes. They must be emotionally unavailable. So I think there's a whole world of possibilities that are really exciting, and a lot of noise. And when people use apps, so about half of people who are marrying today met on the apps, but that means a full half did not meet on the apps. They met
Right.
through a friend, they met at the gym. So when people are using apps to meet, especially because apps are now so gamified, so the tech companies have really figured out how to profit from our itchiness and our dissatisfaction, as all
Yeah.
social media companies are learning to do. And so it really is, unfortunately, incumbent upon the user to really use it as a tool. It is just a tool. I am here on
Right.
the app purely to get from point A to point B. Point B meeting up with you for a drink, a hike, a whatever. So yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. So I'm so excited for your book. You guys, it comes out in 5 days. You can pre-order it right now. It's called Love Every Day, 365 Relational Self-Awareness Practices to help your relationship heal, grow, and thrive, from my friend, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Alex, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it. I really, really love this book, and I really think it's going to help so many people do exactly what the subtitle says: heal, grow, and thrive. So thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you, Terry. Always fun to be with you.